Well, here we are, y'all. It's the end of the year. Can you believe it? Must be time for me to name my album of the year, which was no small task because here in 2024, it's been a fantastic year for Christian rock and metal albums. It was a tough choice. But I'll quickly run you through the top 10 albums that made my list and ultimately which one I named my 2024 album of the year. Stick with me, it's all coming right up. Hey there, y'all. Welcome back to another Tim Talks Christian Rock. Tim Risto here. Hope you are having a great day, and may God bless your day going forward from here. Thanks so much for joining me today for this video. Today is my 2024 album of the year. That always sounds so intimidating and so grand, right? Anytime anybody names their album of the year. And yet, it's also such a subjective exercise, right? Because what I prefer, you may not prefer. You may have a totally different choice for album of the year. But it does kind of capture, that album that speaks to you, in this case me, the most at this point here at year's end. One that I've listened to over and over again, one that I've really enjoyed, one that still just hangs with me, both in terms of the music and the message. And that's really what this is all about. I'm going to go ahead and run through the top 10 that are on my list and ultimately name the one that has made it as album of the year. But again, there's so many good ones this year. Just to highlight one seems always a little bit disingenuous because there's so many great ones. But it's more so just that reflection of what is hitting me at this point in the year. One that I think is kind of a standout. But any one of these really would be great albums to put in that category. So without further ado, I'll run you through my top 10, just briefly talk about each one, list why I think it's in the top 10, and then end up the video with naming my 2024 album of the year. So without further ado, let's get going, y'all. All right, I'm going to go through this top 10 list rather quickly. I'm going to go not in any ranking order, but in order of release date. So I'll start with the one on my list that was released earliest in the year and end up with the one that was released latest in the year. And I'll just highlight kind of quickly on each one of these why they made my top 10 list. Okay, so let's hit it off with the first album. All right, first up, released on March 22nd of this year was Whitecross, Fear No Evil. For those of you that have seen my review of this album, you know what I think of this. The incredible guitar work by Rex Carroll, back in true form. His songwriting is phenomenal. I love the vocals by the new vocalist David Roberts. Of course, the contributions by Michael Fagan and Benny Ramos. Just an entirely great band effort. This album rocks. And it's just got great songwriting, great music, great vocals. Everything about this album just is top notch. I love it. Fantastic album. Really a good rocker. And feels like Whitecross is back. So this is a strong contender, obviously, for album of the year. Love this album. All right, next up, released on March 29th of this year, is All for the King's third album, Darkest Before the Dawn. This band is new to me. First time I've actually listened to them was this album, and boy, is it good. It is a Swedish melodic heavy metal band that has put out some really good stuff on this album. It has, let me see here what the rundown is real quick. Don't know these guys real well, but it has Richard Hoek-Tecke on vocals, Eric Tilling on guitars, Andreas Alof on bass, and Anders Kollerfors on drums. But it also features guest vocals by Ulf Christensen from Jerusalem on the Seventh Seal track, which I think is the one that starts off this album here. Second track, actually. Anyway, this is just a phenomenal album. It's modern sounding, but also got a little classic vibe to it, especially when you have Ulf Christensen in there. But it's also just very fresh. There's something fresh sounding about this album. I love it. I haven't absorbed this album nearly enough, but it struck me so much that I had to put this on the top 10 list. This is a great melodic heavy metal album. You can't go wrong with All for the King, and I look forward to getting to know their back catalog as well. All right, up next is the great album from Dale Thompson and the Boondogs, their third album, Unfinished Business. They actually have a fourth album coming out very soon. But this one is just a phenomenal album, 15 tracks of great blues. Dale Thompson, who saw my review of this, just recently commented and kind of let me know a little bit more about his influences for vocal stylings and blues stylings for this album. And he mentioned Tom Waits and Howlin' Wolf as two of his primary influences. And I can really definitely detect that as I listen to the album again in his vocal leanings and the blues stylings of it. Just great stuff. This album is my favorite. If you've seen my review, I've spoken highly of it. My favorite of the Boondogs albums. Just a great, great album. You cannot go wrong with that. And even at 15 tracks, it is not overstuffed. It is just a joy to listen to. Great stuff. Next up, released on June 7th of this year, was Stryper's To Hell with the Amps, their unplugged, quote-unquote, acoustic album. If you've seen my review of this, you know that I love this one a great deal as well. I think it was well worth the wait. This is actually Stryper's first ever acoustic or unplugged album, I should say. And, it was well worth the wait. This is such a good album. I love it a great deal. The song selection is good. The reinterpretations of these songs are really great. Just a wonderful, wonderful album. I don't know, just Michael's vocal stylings on it sound really good. I like the register that he sings this stuff in here, a little different from, the more rock-leaning albums that Stryper's done. So just a joy to listen to. Great album. All right, back on July 1st of this year came out Motivic's sophomore album, Renouncement. I did a full review on this one. This is just such a great album of kind of thrash-leaning, speed metal, a variety of different rock styles in here too, hard rock styles, very modern sounding, great mix of music styles and variety of songwriting, rich in lyrical writing and spiritual writing. This is really a great album. Another super strong contender for Album of the Year. I love it from the cover art. I love the work by Courtney Simmons and Ryan Roebuck on here. Phenomenal stuff. I loved their first album. This one just took things, I think, to a whole nother level. Great album. It's not getting enough attention, I think. It's a really strong effort. All right, next up, and released on July 19th of this year, I don't have a physical copy of. I've only got a digital copy of, so I'll put the album art up on screen here, is Human Code's first debut album, Break the Silence. Phenomenal album. Human Code is made up of vocalist Michael Drive, formerly Michael Lee of Barren Cross, guitarist George Ochoa of Worldview, Deliverance, and Recon, also drummer Terry Russell from Holy Soldier, and bassist Todd Libby of Worldview. This album is really good. It took me a few listens to kind of get into it a little bit more, but I really love the kind of melodic metal style of it. It's got a very modern sound to it. It's really a great album. You got to kind of keep listening to it, and I think it grows on you more and more. It's another one of these albums that made my top 10 list that I was described as just very fresh sounding. It's refreshing. It's great to have Michael Drive back, and it's great to have George Ochoa in the mix here as well and back. But it still comes across as very fresh sounding. I love that. It's great to have things like that have some familiarity to them in the vocals and guitar work, and yet also just sound refreshingly new and different. Great stuff. August 30th brought us the return of Saint with Immortalizer. Just an incredible album of hard rock and metal. This is such a winner. Saint has been on a run of great albums since The Calf in particular here in more recent history. The Calf, Heaven Fell, and now Immortalizer. Great stuff. This one, to me, is so solid from the cover art to every song on it. And it rocks. And it's just got a hard metal sound. There aren't really ballads on this. It's just great. Hard rock, heavy metal. It's Saint, and I love him. September 13th of this year brought us Stryper's second album of the year, but their first hard rocking album, since the other one was an acoustic one. When We Were Kings came out, and there is no doubt that this continues, in my opinion, Stryper's run of great albums. I think it's a little subtly different from their other more recent albums. Just a slight change, a slight slowing down perhaps in tempo and style. But I like it. I do think this is Michael Sweet's strongest writing on recent albums. It's just really good lyrically and spiritually. It's very good. Strong album. But some great music on here as well, too. I love it. Stryper's still around, and they're still as strong as ever. All right, next up is another album that I don't own a physical copy of yet, but I only have on digital, and that is The Braves' Carnival of Sins. This is another kind of fresh-sounding album, maybe not as hard rocking in some areas as maybe I would prefer, but still an excellent album. You know, the Brave kind of are in their revised phase of life, I guess you could say, starting in 2021 with Evie's Little Garden, which is still kind of the pinnacle I think many fans have for the new, revamped the Brave. In 2022, they came back with Gravedigger, and now they have Carnival of Sins here in 2024. All good stuff, really. And I think this album is a strong one, refreshingly different in some ways, while also still being consistent with this new era of the Brave. Good stuff, strong album, had to be on the top 10 because I'm so glad to have the Brave still around recording stuff and producing some really unique and good albums. All right, so there's a quick rundown of my top 10. Before I announce my album of the year, let me just list off a few quick titles of ones that also kind of are honorable mentions, I guess you could say, which include Harpazo, I think that's how it's pronounced, The Crucible album, which is just a really great kind of concept, dramatic storytelling kind of rock opera, I guess you could say. It's really well done. Love that album. That came very close to being in the top 10. Leviticus has their new album out that came out October 25th. I'm really not putting that in because it's the Swedish version of the album. I know there's an English version coming here in the next year, so it'll probably make my top 10 list next year. But I will at least mention that. They do have one out. Van Zandt, Always Look Up, came out on November 22nd. More of a mellow kind of praise and worshipy album, although there are some southern rock and country vibes to it. That it's a really good album. I do like that one too. Within Silence, The Eclipse of Worlds, very good album. I've had a chance to listen to that a couple times. I like that one too. It's kind of unique. Millennial Reign, World on Fire was good. And Pelletieri has a new one, War Machine, out. I've only heard a little bit of that so far. I like it. That probably deserves an honorable mention. They're always putting out good stuff. Neil Morse, The Restoration, Joseph Part 2, came out earlier this year. I've heard a little bit of that. Really like the sound and vibes of that. I think that deserves an honorable mention as well. So those are some of the other ones that were kind of in the background for possible contending, although some of them I didn't get to listen to real thoroughly. But they're ones that struck me as, hey, these could quite possibly make the list. All right, with all that said, what is my album of the year? Well, I got to tell y'all, it's been a real toss-up between these two albums right here, Saint Immortalizer and White Cross's Fear No Evil. Tough choice. I ultimately had to go with Saint Immortalizer, even though I love Fear No Evil so much too. Fear No Evil is definitely the backup or the second place one, but Saint Immortalizer is just such a great heavy metal hard rock album. The songs are so well written. This band is just firing on all pistons. Again, being the third album from this particular lineup of the band, and mainly with the vocalist who is new. This lineup's been together for at least an album before this too, minus the vocalist. But again, this album is just so good. Saint continues to put out some really great music, and Immortalizer, it's the one. It's just the one that reaches me in terms of the lyrics. There's a lot of depth to a number of the songs in terms of the lyrical and spiritual content. The music is just good. It's hard rock in some cases, but heavy metal on many of the tracks. Just rich sounding music. I can always put this one on and just trust I'm going to have a great time listening to it. This is definitely my album of the year, Saint Immortalizer. Can't go wrong with it. So there you go, y'all. That is my rundown of my top 10 and ultimately naming Saint as my album of the year. What do you all think? Do you agree with my selection? Do you disagree? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Also, which one would you pick as your album of the year for 2024? Would love to hear your selections, your thoughts. There's really no wrong answer. Again, there's just been so much great stuff this year. It's made it really tough even to come up with a top 10. But to ultimately name album of the year, it's tough. But all of these are great albums, great music, great, ministers of music, ministers of God's grace, preaching through music behind these albums, behind these artists and these bands. So great stuff. Anyway, y'all, that's what I got for today. That pretty much closes out the year for Tim Talks Christian Rock. I might have another random video in here yet, but otherwise I'll see you in the new year in 2025 with a fresh slate of all sorts of new videos. First up, I will tell you, is coming a review of Iron Wrath's Master Storyteller album. I'm so excited to share that review with you all. So stay tuned for that in the new year. That's it, y'all. Have a great rest of your day. Go out and listen to some great Christian rock. And above all else, stay in God's Word. Blessings, y'all. Take care. Bye-bye.